Welcome to Americana Archives. Today's headline is The Wreck of the Sleeper. It says, a few years ago, I was making my way from the west to an eastern city and was comfortably arranged in a Pullman sleeper while the night outside was dark and rainy. I had taken a late dinner in the dining car, had a couple of cigars in the smoking compartment, and gone to my section for a book, and had then settled myself in a vacant seat near the middle of the car to get the benefit of the brighter light overhead. If any thought of personal security entered my mind, it was only that I was secure from the disagreeable weather outside, that I was entirely comfortable and rapidly and safely proceeding to my destination. 2 hours or more passed pleasantly away, and 9 o'clock was approaching. The porter began his complex work of letting down and making up beds, and passengers in various parts of the car were beginning the equally complicated business of preparing to stow themselves away for the night. We were running at between 35 and 40 miles an hour. The porter had arranged a section near me and had come to the one directly opposite to the seat I was occupying. He had just lowered the upper berth when I felt a sudden jar that I took to be the effect of the air brakes for an intended stop. It was sufficient to withdraw my attention from my book and caused me to look at the porter, whom I noted in the attitude of suddenly arrested action. In an instant, there was a quick succession of jars, and then an unmistakable bumping along the ties. We were certainly off the track. In another moment, I was aware of a slowly increasing depression on my side of the car. 2 or 3 passengers were in bed. There was sudden startled action on part of all others who were visible, but no word was spoken. I glanced at the porter's face, and the terrified expression it took on as he felt the depression of the side opposite him told me that we were going over. The porter caught my eye, and as he grasped the berth for support, he exclaimed almost in an undertone, "My God, we are gone." All this occurred probably inside of half a minute, but it seemed to me at the time, and it seems to me now, that what I observed and have narrated cannot possibly have passed in so short a period. It took me little time to comprehend that we were off the track, but the gradual depression of my side of the car puzzled me for an appreciable time, and did not suggest to me that it was the beginning of toppling over, and in that moment the thought did not come to me that if we were rolled over, there was no telling so far as we knew when we would stop and where and how we would land. I give these details because I want to describe the sensations one may have in a sudden railway wreck, and to relate some of the incidents of such an event that are generally in such mishaps forgotten in the final results. My first thought was that some force was pressing down my side of the car. Then it occurred to me that the wheels on my side had run clear of the ties and were sinking in the mud, and I thought we would soon come to a standstill when no other inconvenience to us inside the car but an inclined floor. The side near me seemed to be sinking down vertically. I glanced across the open section opposite me, and I was amazed at what seemed to be an unaccountable phenomenon. That side seemed to be rising in the air, and presently I discovered that it was gradually crawling up on a curve, and was slowly coming over my head. Without time to reflect that I was at that instant on the axis of revolution of the toppling car, I grasped the fact that we were turning over. I had remained seated through all these preliminary occurrences, and had really watched them with more interest than apprehension. But now I realized that we were in for something, we knew not what, but likely to be serious, and I instinctively turned my attention to provision for my own safety. And here I did a strange thing, probably prompted by the singular phenomenon I had observed. I flung my feet on the seat toward the window, and braced them against the side of the car, and placed my arms as firmly as I could over the inside arm of the seat, and braced my back against it. I felt I wanted to go face forward as a better way to take advantage of any opportunity that might present itself. I had a fancy that, thus braced, the other side of the car would whirl around me. I actually recalled the sensation I had once as a lad when I rolled down a short decline inside a barrel. The upper side reached its zenith About the time I prepared myself for the turnover, there seemed to me a wavering effort on the part of the car to right itself before the center of gravity passed over my head. I believe that up to that moment, nothing had escaped my observation. It is plain I only half reasoned, but I seemed to fairly have my wits about me. It had seemed to be a long time coming. I knew the crisis was at hand, and I felt that I was as well prepared as I could be, and I confidently counted on being able to take advantage of anything that happened. When one is turned over in a horse carriage, the small dimensions and the chance to note the relations of it to other things outside enable the passenger to quickly comprehend the situation. I recall now that my boyish sensation while rolling down the hill in a barrel was greatly intensified by the fact that I could not see what was happening. A sleeping car is so large, is so much of a house on wheels, in which one may move about and eat and sleep and pass from one compartment to another, and as it rushes over the rails, through unknown country, and through storm and darkness, it is so separated from all surroundings through which it glides, that it seems for the while to be a world of its own. With a tremble of reluctance, this little world in which I was shut up was flung from its orbit into unknown space. I had prepared myself only for some extraordinary revolutions about the axis on which I felt rather safely seated. But when it plunged beyond control of the centripetal force I was exerting, and yielded to the centrifugal force that was too much for me, even my fluttering fancy fled away. Of things that occurred from the time we actually passed the hesitating point and rolled over and over down a not very high embankment until we stopped, I have not the slightest remembrance. I did not perceive anything that happened. I flew around the top and sides and floor more than twice, not even aware that I was accompanied by a number of men and women, a score of bags, and bundles and piles of mattresses and bedclothes and other loose things. I did not see anything, know anything, or think anything. I observed the lash tremble and felt the plunge. The next thing I knew, we stopped with an awful suddenness. When the final crash came to this little wrecked world, the car lay shattered on its side. At this destructive moment, that destroyed every vestige of inside construction, and with nothing but a shell about us, I happened to be on the other side of the car, and therefore a car's width in the air with nothing to hold on to. My first consciousness of things about me was a feeling that I was dropping from an enormous height into the wreck of matter following a crash of worlds. I came down from the upper side on my hands and knees. I rose to my feet and was instantly struck on the shoulder by a lamp that bruised me and covered me with oil and made me stumble and half fall. As I staggered up, a fine cushioned seat struck me on the neck and knocked me down, and I distinctly remember the feel of the soft plush on the seat as it slid across my neck after giving me the blow. In the exciting events immediately following, I did not know that I was so badly hurt in hands, mouth, and vocal organs that 2 or 3 years of trouble to all of them would ensue. I have thought this one of the most singular experiences, for after the wreck, I was called on to work and was for some hours greatly exposed to rain, mud, and discomfort generally. Following the crash of stopping, there was a death-like silence. We were in total darkness. As my stunned senses revived, I noticed that there was not a sound to be heard, inside or outside the car. I thought I had been made stone deaf. I held my hand before my face and could not see it, and I thought perhaps I had been made stone blind. Then the thought came to me that perhaps this was death, and instantly on that thought, my mind began to speculate as to whether I was in this world or the next. I touched my hands together and pinched my leg, and I knew that wherever my soul might be, my consciousness was in my earthly body. Then I thought that the blackness and silence might be approaching death, and with that I became aware that my feet were growing colder than the rest of my body. The fact that I could recognize my condition dispelled at once any illusion or doubt I might have, and turned my thoughts to saving my body. I turned my attention to my feet, and it came to me like a flash that slowly rising water was gradually creeping over them. Silence and darkness and rising water. Was I the sole survivor? And was I thus closed in to be drowned at the bottom of a river? I found that I was standing perfectly upright and free. I was afraid to move, for I thought my slightest movement may dislodge the still vibrating car, or bring a deluge of water from some new place. I bent my knees and ran my extended hand down my leg to my feet until I felt my index finger touch the soft ground, and measuring the nail's breadth of water, waited to feel it rise, but it did not rise, and it felt oily. I drew my hand to my face and discovered by the odor that I was standing in a little pool of coal oil. I remembered the smell of the flying lamp as it struck me on the shoulder, and I quickly passed my hands over my clothes. I seemed to be covered with coal oil, and doubtless the pool at my feet was the drippings from my body. I forgot the danger of drowning in the thought that if fire broke out while I was so hemmed in and helpless, I would be the first thing to burn up in a blaze of coal oil. Just as I realized this new possibility, there came out of the darkness, silence, and wreckage a firm voice that uttered this warning. I am a bridge builder. We do not know where we have landed. The car is not settled yet. Any movement on the part of those who are alive may start it again. We are pretty well off where we are, and it is best not to take the risk of going further. As a bridge builder, I always carry a piece of candle and some matches in my pocket. Keep up your courage, that is, those who are alive. When I can find my pocket, I'll strike a light. I'm alive. Is anyone else? The first response the bridge builder had came from me. His proposal to strike a light made me certain that I was alive. And while I assured him that I was not dead, I protested that, being covered with coal oil, I would be very soon if he struck a light and fired the combustible material all around us. The bridge builder knew what he was about, and firmly inquired if anyone else was alive. Thereupon came various muffled, doubtful, and despondent responses, not all coherent, some not intelligible, but all of them showing that a majority of the passengers had a dazed perception of existence and could respond to offers of help. The bridge builder found his pocket, brought out his candle, and fumbled his matches. Presently, he announced that he was all right now, and I and 2 or 3 men who were revealed by the flash saw him vainly endeavoring to bring the candle in contact with the match. He frankly confessed that the shock had upset his nerve, and he could not do it. A man near him tried it and gave up. In these efforts, the light showed me the porter leaning on a pile of rubbish near me, apparently with the wind knocked out of him. I suggested across to the bridge builder that probably the porter could light the candle, and it was passed over to me. This appeal seemed to pull the porter together, and bracing himself as well as he could, and I bracing him from my side with all the steadiness I had, he finally brought candle and match together, and the lighted candle was handed over to the bridge builder as the safest man to hold it. Gradually, everyone in the body of the car emerged from the piles of bedclothes and upholstered seats and accounted for themselves. There was no commotion, no outcry, and there was almost constant silence. I heard a woman reassuring her daughter, and the daughter responding with words of comfort to the mother, but in low tones and without any indication of being terror-stricken. Men stood still or helped each other with tying of handkerchiefs over cuts and other little attentions, but there was no noise, and all seemed to be quietly waiting for the next event. Where the rest of the train was, none of us knew. We learned afterwards that the truck of the engine tender had broken and thrown the cars one after another from the track, each to its own fate, and the engine, breaking loose, had run ahead a mile or 2 before it was discovered that the train was wrecked. This accounted for the silence outside. The first noise from the outer world was that of a man running. We called out to him to know how we lay, and he cried back to us that we were all right, and that he was going down the track to stop another oncoming train. As we knew we were a distance from the track, this assurance that we were all right meant to us that we were safely landed and had no new danger to face. In the flickering light of the solitary candle, I happened to glance toward the end of the car, and about 2 yards away, I saw a man struggling to bring another man to his feet. The latter seemed to be pinned down, and the man helping responded to my questions that he complained of heavy timbers being across his legs. I crawled over to where his rescuer was tugging at him in vain endeavor to draw him out, and offered a helping hand. But every time we pulled, he would relax himself and his arms would fly up, and he would not move. We concluded to make an effort to lift the timbers. So in much pains, we crawled through broken glass and wood and heaps of scattered things to each side of him. We laid hold of the weight, pressing him down, and to our great surprise, entirely freed him by lifting off a mattress. Then we discovered that the pinioned passenger had been laboring under the hallucination that the train had fallen across his legs and that he could not move. Why he could not hold his arms down when we attempted to pull him out was a thing he could not explain at all. We grew weary waiting for relief, but in time it came. We heard the rush of feet and saw the flash of lights. There was a great pounding and cutting at each end of the car to release the people imprisoned in the smoking room and the stateroom. Then suddenly, a man clambered on the upper side of our car, and thrusting down through the window one of those flaming can torches, so common about railroad yards and stations, he cheerfully sang out, "Down there, is anybody alive there?" He was answered by the upturned faces of half a dozen men who came under the flash of his light. He lost no time in sympathy or comment. He simply said, "Here, if any of you can get up here, I'll pull you through, and the two of us can start pulling out the others." Giving each of us quick inspection, he said that I was best suited to his present purpose. In a moment, I was making my way up towards his window, and on coming within reach, he extended a powerful arm and seized me by the back of the collar. I had been surprised and bewildered at the accident through which I had just passed, but not more so than at the strength and dexterity with which this powerful young brakeman took me out of midair and jerked me through the window. I had not recovered my breath before he had me down flat, reaching with him to extended arms beneath us, and in a moment we had another man on the outside. The top side of the car seemed to be all windows, and this new man came nearer than I did to falling through the next window as soon as he came through the first. Thus all who could walk were taken out, and after 2 or 3 hours' delay, we were carried by an improvised train to a way station several miles back to pass the night. The next day, we were sent forward on a regular train. As we approached the scene of the wreck, the train slowed down to go safely over the damaged roadbed, and finally came to a stop to let the passengers view the singular spectacle. A like effect might be produced by a boy flinging with all his might a toy train of cars upon the floor. The great scattered broken cars looked as if they had been picked up and tossed here and there and everywhere. As I stood in the train, looking out at the ruins of the wrecked sleeper, a venerable and reverend-looking gentleman near me asked some questions of me. At the same moment, the hardy and strong young brakeman who had hailed us cheerily and jerked me through the window so neatly the night before, and whose better acquaintance I made at a later hour, came through the car and greeted me. He made some allusion to our bad fix of the previous night, and pointed to the shapeless sleeper that seemed to have turned over on its side to die. The reverend gentleman at my side followed the direction with his eyes, and then half to himself, but in sympathetic tone, he exclaimed, bad enough indeed." The hardy young brakeman glanced quickly at the shattered car, then at the reverend-looking gentleman, then at me. The smile on his honest and brave face died out in thought. He seemed to be carefully weighing his words. With utmost gravity, he looked at the reverend gentleman and slowly responded, "Well, I'm damned if it isn't a genteel sufficiency." This article was written by KPH. This story came from the great state of Pennsylvania, being reported in the Philadelphia Times of December 6, 1896. Thank you for joining us today. If you want to continue to uncover all of America's lost and forgotten history, then remember before you leave to hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and remember to like and comment below. And we will see you next time on Americana Archives.